Good afternoon, everyone. I am Pooja Raj. I'm PhD scholar at Delhi University, and also I'm a volunteer at In Dialogue Foundation, and I was also an intern in 2019. With this, I welcome you all to the 9th interactive session of the certificates course. Today, we have a very distinguished speaker, Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar, with us, whom I had a pleasure to meet in person in a conference held on Gandhi in 2019, which was sponsored by In Dialogue Foundation. A career diplomat, Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar has served as Ambassador of India to Kazakhstan, Sweden, and Latvia, and also as Secretary, Principal Executive Officer of the National Foundation of Communal Harmony, and an autonomous organization with the Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India. He has also held several distinguished and significant positions in Indian Embassy in Washington, Moscow, Brazil, Geneva, Bangkok, Teheran, and Dhaka. Currently, Mr. Ashok Sajjanhar, Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar, is the president of several institutes, such as he's also a member of several institutes, such as governing body of Sanskriti Educational Foundation, Indian Institute of Law and Management, New Delhi, VPM Center for International Relationships, Mumbai, and currently Ashok Sajjanhar is also president of Institute of Global Studies in New Delhi. He is distinguished fellow at Ananta Aspen Center. So with this, I would like to introduce the topic of the session. It's dialogue, a vital element of peace. With this, I would request the Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar to take over the session and hand it over, regulate as you want.
Okay, thank you very much, Pooja, and thank you very much for this very generous and gracious introduction. Let me first of all thank In Dialogue Foundation for the very kind invitation. I'm delighted to be here. And also when I was discussing this subject with Mr. Behzad Fatimi, then I suggested, because there is an inextricable link between dialogue and peace. So maybe I could share my thoughts, my views, as far as these two issues are concerned, dialogue and peace, because both these elements, in my view, are extremely important and extremely relevant in the world today, in the world that we are living today. Of course, they have always been very important, but particularly now, and maybe as I go forward, I'll share some examples from current real day life, and then we could have a discussion thereafter. I, of course, would like to, at the outset, also like to congratulate the In Dialogue Foundation for the very important and useful work that they have been doing. As Pooja, you mentioned, 2019, there was this conference on Mahatma Gandhi. But I think in addition to that, so many different areas to bring peace, to bring people on the same platform in terms of thinking, to bring tranquility, to bring greater understanding, greater cooperation, greater collaboration. So In Dialogue has been working on this, and I've had the pleasure of being associated with this for a number of years. And I'm extremely happy to have got another opportunity to address the participants of this program. Unfortunately, because of COVID-19, we can do it only over the virtual format. But maybe it is, in a manner of speaking, it is lucky also, because otherwise, if it was not a virtual format, then in terms of the expanse, whether it is geographical or otherwise, we would not have been able to cover such a big spectrum, such a big area where we are able to reach right now. So what I'm going to do, that in the time that is available to me, I was told about 40-45 minutes, I should speak, and then after that we have comments and questions, answers from the floor, and I look forward to that very much, because I know that that is what is really the main content of any presentation. So I look forward to a discussion with all of you. But in this
So,
45
in
minutes,
total we have 2 hours. So you can take up to 1 hour for the lecture, and we can have
yeah.
another for.
So let's see how it goes, because
Yes.
having been many a times on the other side of the desk, also other side of the fence also, I think there is, and particularly I think everyone is at home, and particularly after the lunch, the assimilating possibilities also to that extent get somewhat limited. But I'll speak for about 45 minutes or whatever, however, and then we can go ahead with this discussion. So first, possibly along with peace, along with dialogue, maybe we could also speak a little bit about development, because that is also a very integral element of all these issues that we would be discussing. So, when we speak about dialogue, of course, we often speak about conversation, we speak about communication, we talk about trying to promote understanding and appreciation of each other's points of view. This is, of course, designed to bridge differences. This is to correct misapprehensions, misconceptions, and find areas of similarity and convergence. So this is dialogue is all about. I'm sure all of you are aware that dialogue, actually, the word dialogue itself comes from the Greek word dialogos, and in that logos means word or meaning of a word, and dia means through. So through the meaning of a word, through an exchange of communication, there is a stream of meaning that flows between two individuals or two agencies or two groups, and something new emerges as a result of that. So it is not basically, a dialogue is not to analyze things or to win an argument or to exchange opinions, but it is a process by which individuals are required to suspend their opinions and to listen to everybody else's opinions and try to come to some sort of middle ground or some areas of convergence. I will, of course, when I speak about what dialogue is, I will also speak about what dialogue is not, so that we are able to have a good comprehension. But also, having said that, I also must provide a rider that these ideal circumstances and ideal situations of a dialogue that I speak about, they are in real life not all that easy to come about. They are rather difficult to come about. So we need to be mindful of that. And to create conditions for having a dialogue of that nature, I think we need to really work towards it. So what is dialogue? I think it can also be defined as a secure means of communication between individuals or between groups. This is aimed at exchange of views, at exchange of knowledge, improving understanding, having more impressions and perceptions, so as there is an objective, so as there is to keep, to reach a common understanding of the subject matter at heart of the dialogue. So this is very important. There is a particular objective as far as this is concerned, to reach some sort of a common understanding, and also to overcome misunderstandings and dispel stereotypes. That's why we say that when you are entering into a dialogue, when you're going in for a dialogue, you should suspend all your preconceived notions, preconceived perceptions, stereotypes of either issues or of individuals. You should go in with humility. You should go in with respect, to listen to the other person and try to understand her or his point of view, opinion, and appreciate that. So this is basically designed to increase mutual understanding and mutual respect. So how to instill a dialogue in our hearts and minds as a value, bring it as a value in our minds and hearts, and not really develop it as a skill. as a skill, we know that there are so many things that we can try to do, so that even though mentally, psychologically, emotionally, we are not in tune with it, but still we are able to do it very well. Here it is to make it a part of your thinking system, to make it a part of your value system. And this is essential, because dialogue is the only way to create a better world and to achieve global peace. So I think when we are talking about dialogue as to what is the need, what is the necessity, how do we approach it, then this, of course, is very, very important to understand, that we have to shed our preconceived notions, we have to shed our thoughts, and we have to go in with an open mind, with respect for the other person, with humility, and try to appreciate and understand what the other person is trying to communicate to us. Of course, this would require better listening skills to understand other person's point of view correctly, not necessarily to agree with the other person. So when we are looking at a dialogue, it is a better understanding and appreciation, not necessarily to agree with what the other person is saying, she or he is saying. But of course, it does become possible to agree when there are, what are the areas of agreement, what are the areas of disagreement, developing, as I said, mutual respect for each other, building bridges of communication, transforming from a state of misperception or ignorance or intolerance to a state of deep understanding and respect. So this is what basically we are trying to achieve when we are trying to say what a dialogue is all about. In terms of objectives, as I mentioned, collectively reach mutual understanding, also find some common grounds. It tends to a real dialogue, a positive dialogue, tends to reduce fears and helps and fosters stronger and better relationship. It is transformational because it changes the individual perception of the other, and therefore of the conflict or of the hostile relationship that an individual might be having with the other. It changes the relationship, as I mentioned earlier, from being adversarial to respectful. So this is what we are trying to bridge, this gap, go from here where we have stereotypes, where the relationship is adversarial, where the relationship is hostile, to another where we do not have any preconceived notions, and we are listening to the other person, to what she is saying, with respect, with humility. Let me now share a few thoughts in terms of what a dialogue is not. What I have just told you, what are the essential elements of a dialogue. And now let me share with you what a dialogue is not. It is not a conversation, because when you are having a conversation, that really means that there is no objective, there is no end product or end goal that you have in sight. You are having a conversation, you might be discussing the weather, you might be discussing a book, you might be discussing a political development that has taken place. It's a conversation and you're sharing information with each other, but there is no definite objective or end in sight. It is also not a plain discussion, because in a discussion, what you are trying to do is you are exploring an issue. You are trying to find out more information about the subject. So it is more about the issue that is being dealt with, and it is not so much about the participants, not about the individuals. While here, when we are engaged in a dialogue, we want to find more about her, what she is thinking, what she wants, what her desire, what her point of view is. So that is here, it is the issue, the subject that we are discussing, which is becomes important in a discussion. But when we are having a dialogue, then it is the individuals and their thinking that becomes very important. It is also not a conference, because in conference, as all of you are aware, people will come, they will speak about a particular subject, they will share their thoughts and ideas, and it's in a very formal setting that they will be meeting. While a dialogue is less formal, it is much more informal. It is also not a forum for sharing theories. It is not for making general statements, but it is, I'm sure you can see that there are some similarities, but then there are a number of differences also. Because here also in a conference, also it is primarily a subject-based. What is the issue on which you are sharing information? Then it is not advocacy. When you are doing advocacy of any particular issue, you are trying to convince the others that your idea is the best idea. And but in dialogue, there is no such intent or pressure to convince anyone about anything. There is the only basic fundamental objective is that we should have increased mutual understanding. Then it is not also a consultation process, because in a consultation process, you are sharing some sort of feedback or your opinion on certain topics. There is not a relationship between a beneficiary and a service provider, because in that case, the service provider is wanting to get the feedback from the beneficiary. So it is not such a consultation also. It is not a debate, because in a debate, it is always a very hostile atmosphere that you are developing. You are trying to argue, you are trying to put forth that your position is the right position, your position is the correct position. While in a dialogue, it doesn't happen. In a dialogue, you are not so totally wedded to your idea. You listen to the other person also with equal amount of respect. Then lastly, it is also not a negotiation, because in a negotiation also, you are trying to get the maximum for yourself, because you have certain bottom lines, you have certain red lines, and you are trying to expand your area, your, whatever you can get out of that negotiation, so that the other person with whom you are negotiating, that she is able to get as little as possible. You have to concede as little as possible, and you have to gain as much as possible. So it definitely is not also a negotiation. So I've told you, it is not advocacy, it is not a conversation, pure, simple conversation, it is not a debate. So there are all these things which it is not. And as I had mentioned to you, and I'll also share a few sayings, some of the quotations about dialogue, and I think that will also bring home to you what are the essential elements of the dialogue. So basically, what we try to do is we try to find inclusive solutions for challenges that we face today. We empower young people to actively participate, to become stakeholders, to take a charge of their own life, of the circumstances, of the situations, and participate in decision making around them. So it can, the process of dialogue can, of course, apply in a society, in a community, in a country, or internationally. It is equally valid, because if we want peace, if we want growth, if we want tranquility, then there is no other alternative but to have dialogues amongst the various different streams of thoughts and ideas. Now, a few quotations on dialogue, and this is the one that I liked the most. It is by Thich Nhat Hanh, and he says, in a true dialogues, both sides are willing to change. I think that is very important, that when you are engaging in a dialogue, then both sides should be prepared to change. Because if it is only one side that is serious about the dialogue and is willing to change, then of course you will not be able to move anywhere. As they say, you can not clap with one hand. You need two hands to clap. So even if you want to get a result out of a dialogue, there has to be equal intent, there has to be equal interest, there has to be equal desire on both sides to make a dialogue work, be successful, to have basically, and this is something that I have used very extensively, not only in dialogue processes, but also in negotiating processes. And also when I used to, as Pooja mentioned, I used to head the National Foundation for Communal Harmony, which talks about promoting communal harmony amongst different sects and faiths and beliefs and religions in the country and in the world. Then I have also always focused on that we must try to expand our areas of convergence. So when we are talking with people, we should start with areas where we agree rather than areas where we do not agree. Because if you start talking about areas where you do not agree, then you will get stuck only on discussions on that issue. For instance, just to give you an example, I'm sure each and every one of you is aware of that. Meaning, if we are talking about India and Pakistan, for instance, and you start the conversation with the issue of Kashmir, you will not get anywhere because you will get stuck there. So always it is a good idea to start with areas where there is convergence of views and there is convergence of interest. Because once you have that and once there is prior experience that you have been able to have a better understanding, it also builds trust. It also builds confidence. It also builds faith and belief in the other person. And so that is why I have always been a very strong proponent and a very strong votary of, number one, starting with areas where there is by and large convergence and both sides have an equal interest. For instance, meaning again coming back to India-Pakistan issues, meaning area of bilateral trade, for instance. If you're talking about trade, it is of benefit to India, it is of benefit to Pakistan, because Pakistan gets sugar, gets cotton from other areas, which is much more expensive. It can get the same from India. So it is, and India can also get some items from Pakistan, which could be beneficial to it. If Pakistan does not allow access of Indian cargo from India, from Amritsar to Afghanistan or to Central Asia. And by doing so, it is there is another saying that you cut your nose to spite your face. Because if it were to allow that, not only will it be able to win goodwill from India, but it will also be able to earn a lot of transit fees from India. And it will be able to earn goodwill of Afghanistan. It will be able to earn goodwill of Central Asian countries, and earn the goodwill of the Afghan people, for instance. Like right now, all of us are aware that there is a big problem as far as Afghanistan is concerned. As far as humanitarian relief is concerned, they don't have food to eat. They don't have medicines. There is a huge economic crisis. It verges on catastrophe. And for several weeks, what India has told Pakistan is that we are willing to supply 50,000 tons of wheat. Of course, it goes as grant to Afghanistan, and you permit this wheat to go through your territory into Afghanistan. But because of its preconceived notions and ideas that it doesn't want to have good relations with India, it has not been giving this permission. Only very recently, We heard from the Pakistan Prime Minister, Mr. Imran Khan, saying that we will consider, but then we'll have to draw up clear modalities, etc., etc. The point I'm making is that by one simple gesture of this nature, this would have very many positive impacts in a large number of areas. So I think coming back to this, there has to be a desire on both sides to be able to change, and then only can dialogues be successful. The other quotation that I want to share with you, which I found very appropriate, is that dialogue cannot exist without humility. And this is a very important element of dialogue, that one should be humble, one should be modest, one should not be always wearing your strength and power on your sleeves when you go in for a dialogue or some sort of a conversation with the other party. And I think that is one of the biggest reasons, one of the foremost challenges why we don't find peace through dialogue these days, because there are countries which are at different stages of development, which are at different stages of national comprehensive power, national comprehensive strength. And when they go, they are mindful of this differential in power between them and other countries. Just to give you again another example, as I said, I will use current day examples to speak about dialogue and peace. When the new administration of Mr. Joe Biden came to power, of course, the idea was that the aggressiveness and the belligerence and the assertiveness and the expansionist tendencies of China that have been visible over the last several, not only months, but years, that there would be a pushback against that. But the latest meeting, I think it was on the 15th of November, between Joe Biden and Xi Jinping, there they came to have a conversation. But here, all the conversation was in terms of what Mr. Xi Jinping was telling his American counterpart, that any changes that need to be made in attitude, in policy, in behavior, in actions, it needs to be made on the part of the United States. And as far as China is concerned, it has nothing to change. It is what it is doing is absolutely right. For instance, the statements and the comments that were made that since the China emerged on the global scene as a country, it has never occupied any other countries, even a single inch. It has not attacked any other country. And I think all the countries in our region, they can see how deceptive and how dishonest this sort of a statement is. So I think if we are looking at this sort of conversation, then this is not a real dialogue, and that will really not engender any peace in this. So basically, it has both the sides have to, all sides, maybe here I'm talking about two sides, but all the sides, because if you're negotiating in a multilateral context, if you're having a dialogue in a multilateral context, then all sides have to come with a certain sense of humility and not with the sense of power that they have. The last one in this, I would say, is that there are no military solutions. Dialogue and diplomacy are the only guarantees of lasting peace. And that is why we find that more countries are becoming democratic, need to become democratic, because at least the platform is there, whether it is in the parliamentary system of democracy in India, or if it is in a presidential system, which prevails in either the United States or in France or some of the other countries, there are fora, there are platforms where discussions and a dialogue can take place. And if these all the stakeholders and all the players in these institutions are acting for the benefit of their own country, of their own people, to bring them peace, to bring a better standard of living, then of course all of them can start talking the same language. But then we find that even in mature democracies, even in United States, which calls itself the oldest democracy, we saw what are the problems that transpired on the 6th of January when the US Congress was to put a stamp on the fact that Mr. Joe Biden had been elected as the president. But then Donald Trump, he sent some of these his supporters to the Congress to create mayhem and to create problems there. So even in the oldest democracy, we have seen that there are problems. So of course, we can always, we always have to recognize that democracy is a work in progress. There are discussions and all countries need to develop and need to evolve as per their own genius, as per their own talents. The other aspect possibly I could mention here is that democracy cannot be superimposed on any country from anywhere else. And I think we have seen that in the case, very vividly in the case of Afghanistan, where the United States tried to come and it tried to put in place a democratic system. Of course, there were very many other faults and errors as far as blunders that the United States committed. But I think it is the desire for democracy has to come from the grassroots level, from the country itself, rather than being superimposed from the above. So these are some of the thoughts that I wanted to share with you about dialogue, what it is not, and what are the objectives. Basically, again, to put it very briefly, anyone going in for dialogue, you have to go in without any misconceptions, any preconceived notions, any stereotypes. Go in with humility and try to understand the other person, what she's saying, what her thoughts are, ideas are. Try to find areas of convergence, areas where the views are similar, areas where the views are identical. Try to expand those areas of convergence. As I said, if you start with areas where you differ, then you'll never be able to advance from there. But if you are, in terms of concentric circles, if you are expanding the areas of convergence, then the areas of divergence, which are on the periphery of these concentric circles, they will keep getting narrower and narrower. And so we will be able to have a much larger area of convergence. I'm quite confident of that. And when I come to the issue of peace, also I'll speak about this. And then the concerned parties will realize that they have much more to gain, much more to benefit. There is much greater advantage if they are cooperating and collaborating and working together, rather than using some particular elements and not having good relations and having adversarial and hostile relations with each other. So I think that is extremely important. Let me now come to the issue of peace. I have spent, I think, about 35 minutes. So maybe I'll take up another 15, 20 minutes or so on the issue of peace. And in that context, I'll possibly speak, also refer to the, in the Indian context, and the Indian example also in that sense. So first of all, I think what we need to recognize is that peace cannot be understood to mean an absence of conflict, to mean an absence of discord. to mean an absence of violence, to mean an absence of hatred. No, just the absence of this is not peace. What we really mean by peace is that there should be harmony, there should be amity, there should be cordiality, there should be good feeling uh, uh, as far as different people are concerned, the different societies are concerned, different even as far as workforce is concerned. They should, whether it is labor, whether it is management, all of them, that there is a very harmonious relationship between them. Also, we need to recognize that peace has been identified as a very important component of the Sustainable Development Goals. One of the 5 major objectives is peace. The other are people, planet, prosperity, and partnership. So 4 others: people, of course, better standard of living, prosperity, better economic living, planet that we have in terms of climate change, and partnership that we are working together. So in addition to that, peace is very, very important, because if we want to have partnership, if we want to have prosperity, peace is extremely relevant. And in fact, the large number of UN organizations, they have spoken about the essential elements of peace. And whether it is UNESCO or some of the other international organizations like the ECOSOC, they have spoken about the elements of peace as equal access to justice. So it is not only having amiable relations, but individuals should have equal access to justice. There should be respect for human rights. There should be effective rule of law. There should be good governance, effective and accountable institutions. So all these are essential elements of a peaceful society, of a peaceful community, of a peaceful nation. And in fact, if you look at these 17 goals which are covered by the Sustainable Development Goals, Goal 16 addresses this issue of peace and partnership. And it focuses on issues of inequality, of illicit financial flows, protection of fundamental freedoms of individuals, fostering intercultural understanding, tolerance, and mutual respect. So these are all elements of peace that we need to be mindful about, because it is not a very narrow definition of peace that we should be looking at, but a much broader, a much more inclusive, a much more comprehensive definition of peace that we have to look at. And this is also covered by the UNESCO, which its guiding motto is something like this: that since wars begin in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that defenses of peace must be constructed. So UNESCO also determines that it is not only the political and economic engagement and arrangements between the different governments that are enough. Peace must also be built upon the intellectual and moral solidarity of humanity. So it is not only economics, it is not only politically that everything is quiet, but even as far as the cultural value systems, the moral value systems, intellectual value systems, they also need to be protected and preserved. And that is what are the essential elements of peace. There is need for respect, there is need for acceptance and appreciation of the rich diversity of our world's cultures and our forms of expression. So this is how the UNESCO defines peace and says that this is what we have to start working on. The other aspect, maybe what I could do share with you in the time available is, what are the causes for the fact that there is violence and there is hatred, there are wars, and how can we possibly deal with them? So very quickly, I think 3 or 4 aspects become very, very clear. One is, maybe if I were to start with, that there is so much of diversity in this world. And so when you are trying to bring all these diverse, whether it is in terms of thoughts, ideas, cultures, languages, religions, you need to bring them together. Of course, you need to have dialogue. So to manage diversity also, this diversity can be a factor of strife, and this diversity can be a factor where people are not getting along with each other and there is violence. Meaning, just to give you an example, and since I think most of the participants, am I correct in assuming that most of the participants are from India or of Indian origin, or do we have people from outside also?
Most of us are from India, some are from outside. Most of us are from India.
Yeah, so you have a fair understanding and appreciation of the Indian system and evolution, particularly over the last 70, 75 years since the independence. So let me take an example from that. You know, when India became independent in 1947, then most of the political pundits and the political scientists, they prophesied that India would not be able to, number one, stay as a united country, and number two, it would not be able to stay as a democracy. And the reason for that was very, very simple, twofold, 2 reasons they gave. Number one is because there is so much of diversity in India, meaning you travel every 100 kilometers, you will have a new religion, you have a new dialect, you have new attire, you have new cuisine, you have everything is changing. If you look at our languages, the whole nation, how many languages it has. So they said that this India will never be able to deal with all this diversity. Number two, so it will not be able to stay united. Number two, there is a huge disparity in India between the rich and the poor. I'm talking about 1947. Disparity continues to be today also. But in 1947, it was said there's so much of disparity and there is so much of a difference in terms of living standards of rich and the poor, that India will never be able to stay as a democracy, and it will go towards authoritarianism. Maybe all these political pundits were not far off the mark, because many of the countries that became independent along with India after the Second World War, or maybe up to 1960 or something, many of them, they started off as democracies, but very soon they all started going the way of authoritarianism or military dictatorship or autocracies. So we did not find very many, whether it is in our own neighborhood, Southeast Asia, South Asia, you look at West Asia, of course, is quite different, in Africa, in Latin America. So number one, they never stayed as democracies, except India. India, irrespective of its disparities, it not only has continued to stay as a democracy, but has continued to grow, become stronger economically and otherwise, and prosper. And secondly is, in terms of the diversity, there have been countries which have been far less diverse than India, and they have not been able to stay united. You look at the Soviet Union. It was a single country from 1917 onwards, and within about 70 years, it broke apart into 15 different constituents, different republics. You have 3 Baltic republics, you have 5 Central Asian states, and you have some states in the Caucasus, and of course, sorry, the largest one of them is the Russian Federation. So 15 independent countries emerged out of one country. You look at Yugoslavia, that also broke into several constituent parts, Moldova, Croatia, Montenegro, so many of them, Kosovo, so many of them, all because of the diversity. Then in our own neighborhood, Pakistan was created in 1947 on the basis of religion, same religion. They had the same religion, but they could not handle the diversity on account of language. Because in West Pakistan, you had Urdu, on East Pakistan, you had Bengali. So just the difference of language was not able to keep them together. And that also split apart in less than a quarter of a century. In 24 years, from 1947 to 1971, it emerged, East Pakistan emerged as an independent country in Bangladesh. And, you know, if someone were to think that these things happen only in developing countries, then that also is not true. Because you see, even in Europe, you had Czechoslovakia, which came together as a united country after the Second World War. And then it broke apart in 1994. Of course, it broke apart peacefully into the Czech and the Slovak republics. So there also, because their own cultures and their own identities, they were not able to deal with. So all that notwithstanding, India has been able to handle its diversity and handle its disparities. So while I would accept and acknowledge that the disparities continue to be there, and in some cases, I could even acknowledge that diversities have even widened, have become greater, but at least in terms of poverty, the levels of poverty has come down very significantly. And there are, in terms of both absolute numbers as well as percentages, the number of people below the poverty line is less than what it was definitely in the 1990s. So in that sense, things, of course, could have been better, we could have performed better, like some of the other countries have done. But I think we need to recognize that it is no mean feat, it is no mean achievement that we have continued to stay democratic, we have continued to stay united, and we have continued to be developing strongly in economic terms also. And going forward, of course, there are challenges. I would be the first one to accept, first one to acknowledge, whether it is external challenges on the northern frontier with China, whether it is on the western frontier with Pakistan, whether there are internal challenges of instability, all those are there. But I think India finds itself today in a much stronger place, in a much as a much more resilient country when it moves forward. Also looking at the Indian example, I think there is no other country. Okay, let me now share some thoughts as to what are the causes for destruction of peace. Why is it that peace is, it becomes difficult to maintain peace? Why is it that there are efforts and attempts made to violate the peaceful circumstances and surroundings? So, very quickly, off the top of the cuff, I could say, number one, it is mentioned that the fight amongst different religions is one of the most important, most significant causes of lack of peace in the world. And we have seen it, whether it is the Crusades, whether it is the conquest by the Ottoman Empire and creation of that, and the fight amongst religions, the lack of harmony amongst religions has been a very important element of the fact. And it's also been said that it is not possible to have peace in the world unless we are able to bring peace amongst religions. So what has been the Indian example or Indian experience as far as peace amongst religions is concerned? I think if we were to look at it historically, we are on a very strong footing. We are on a very sure footing because number one, 4 of the world's major religions have been born in India. So I don't think there is any other country in which 4 major religions of the world, they have been born there. So starting with Hinduism, of course, many people call Hinduism a way of life and not really a codified religion in that sense that there is no single text as far as Hindu religion is concerned. And it is also mentioned that, Hindu word came from Sindhu, which is name of the Indus River. And people who were living on this side of the Indus River were called Hindus because there is, that is how the word was pronounced rather than calling it Sindhu. So the people who are living on the other side, they were called Hindus. So it is the way of living, and as the lifestyle, it has evolved from thousands of years from the Indus Valley civilization right up to now. So Hinduism and Buddhism, Jainism, which came to the country, and these were reform religions because the power of the priests had become too much. So these were reform religions that came out 2,500 years ago. Mahavir as one of the Tirthankars of the Jains, and Lord Gautam Buddha as the who preached the gospel of Buddhism, who was born as Prince Siddhartha. And the last one was Sikhism, that is in about 500 years ago, 1469, the one who started Sikhism, Guru Nanak, he was born in 1469. So 4 religions, and all the other religions that have come to India have also been accepted and acknowledged with open arms. The first one was to come, were the Jews, and there are different accounts which seem to suggest that either the Jews came here in the 6th century BCE when the first temple of Solomon was burnt, was desecrated in Jerusalem. The second wave came in 1st century CE or 1st century AD when the second temple was burnt. And then there have been waves of Jews who have continued to come into India. And particularly after what is known as the Alhambra decree, by which Spain expelled all the Jews in 1492, they came to India. So irrespective of the time that they have come, they have always been very warmly welcomed and received, and they have had always, all of you must have read stories and accounts, and even Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice, where you come to see that Jews have been discriminated against and hated all around the world. I don't think I have come across any country where they are not discriminated against, except India. India, they have been warmly welcomed. They have lived here in different parts of the world, of the country, and they have made very significant contributions. And I'm sure many of those names are household names to you, whether it is General Jack Jacob, who took the surrender of the Pakistan army in Dhaka, Bangladesh in 1971, along with Air Chief Marshal Arjun Singh, or it is the Leela Sampson, who is the doyen of Bharatanatyam. She is a Jew. Or so many places, if you are in Mumbai or Kolkata, the Sassoon Dogs, the Sassoon Library. So all of them have been, so their numbers have been minuscule, but they have contributed immensely to the Indian development, economic development and growth. Similarly, others also, for instance, the Zoroastrians, they came here in the 7th, 8th century AD, and they were also very warmly welcomed, very warmly received. And there is a very nice anecdote which possibly I could share with you, which is that, the Zoroastrians, they were also called Parsis. They lived in Persia, what is now Iran. So when they were persecuted, when Islam came there in the 7th, 8th century AD, so they were persecuted, they were forced to flee from there. And they came to India in Gujarat. And the king of Gujarat, to him they came, and the king understood that they have come to seek asylum. So he was a very wise man, and he sort of told his courtiers to bring him a glass of milk that was full right up to the brim. So he wanted to send out a message to them that in my territory, I have enough people, I don't have space for any more people, so I will not be able to give you any refuge or asylum. So the leader of the Parsi community who had come, they follow their holy book is Zendavesta, and they have the fire temples and all that sort of things. So he was also a very wise man. He requested the courtier to bring him a big spoonful of sugar. So he got him the sugar, he put the sugar in the milk, and thereby telling the king that they will not take any space, but they will only add sweetness to the society of the country that they're coming to. So they were allowed to come and stay, and their population also is very, very minuscule, but they have also contributed very significantly to Indian peace, prosperity. You know the names of the Tatas, Ratan Tata, Dadabhai Nauroji, Freddie Mercury, you name it. There are so many of them that have contributed. And the other religions, of course, whether it is Islam, it is Christianity, it is Baha'is, all of them have come to India, and they have contributed to the growth. The point I'm making is historically and in terms of the heritage and legacy, India has a very strong heritage of peaceful coexistence. And that is what is sought to be taken forward also. That is what we need to do. That is what we need to take forward. I think that is also in terms of the principle which also emerges from the holy scriptures, which speaks about the whole world as a family. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that is the first, when the Prime Minister went in 2014 to the UN General Assembly, then he also spoke about the philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the whole world is a family. And it appears in the Maha Upanishad and in the Rig Veda. And there it says that people who are of small minds, they will speak about that this is mine and that is yours. But people who are generous, people who are evolved, who they will, for them, the whole world is a family. And I think that is the philosophy that we need to aspire to. That is the ideology that we need to aspire to. And I think when the Prime Minister speaks about Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas, that means taking everyone along, having the confidence of everyone and working towards prosperity and well-being of everyone. I think that is what we are truly looking at. So the first is in terms of developing peace is peace amongst religions. That is what we really need to work towards, what we really need to aspire. There is governments can do whatever they can, but in my view, the responsibility is equally, if not more, of the civil society. Responsibility is equally, if not more, of the individuals, that in our own behavior, in our own attitude to our sisters and brethren and all the people that we come in contact with, we should not connect with them on the basis of one or the other religion, but basically connect with them as a human being. I think as The Indian philosophy also, talks about that it looks upon every individual as an Atman, which is an element of the supreme being, of the supreme authority. That is why when in India we greet each other, it is always done with a namaste, fold hands and bow to the other person. And why do you do that? Because you're not bowing to the physical manifestation of the other person. You are bowing to the Atman, to the essential element of the Almighty that also exists in each and every one of us. So if it exists in each and every one of us, that is what we need to respond to, that is what we need to connect with, rather than looking upon individuals as belonging to a particular caste or a particular creed or particular sex or gender or religion. So this is number one that I wanted to speak about. Now, I've already taken more than 1 hour, so I'll take 5 minutes more to speak about 2 or 3 other issues which can destroy peace, which can vitiate peace, and which all of us need to be conscious about and need to work towards. The second is, in my view, the economic disparities, that I spoke about earlier also, when the political scientists mentioned that India will not be able to stay as a united country. So economic disparities also lead to a lot of violence, lead to a lot of peace, because and in that context, I think it is essential that democracies work effectively, and democracies in terms of laws that are made, in terms of economic projects that are taken up, in terms of initiatives that are taken up, that all of them will go to reduce these disparities, or definitely try to pull out people from below the poverty line so that they can have a standard of decent standard of living. Then I find, in terms of discrimination, I think on the base of caste, race, color, there is huge discrimination. Even in India, when you find people from, we've had these instances from the Northeast, people come and they are working in different parts of the country. And my personal experience has been that they are the most courteous, the most cordial, the most hardworking, and the kindest people who come from northeast of our country. But still there is discrimination against them. That needs to stop, and I think that can be done needs to be done through education. Each one of us needs to contribute towards that. There is discrimination against women. So there's discrimination on the basis of sex, on the basis of gender. That needs to be done away with. And again, once women become empowered, both in terms of education, in terms of getting the right skill sets, and we make sure that there are no glass ceilings above them, and on the basis of merit that they are able to develop, that they are able to grow, that they are able to get their rightful place in whether it is in politics, or it is in society, or it is in business, or in academia, that it is their gender is not used to pull them down. I think that is something that we need to work on. The second last element would be in terms of climate change. I think climate change is also an issue which foments a lot of, and particularly, number one, the climate change affects the poorer countries, the developing countries, much more severely than developed ones. And even in developing countries, it is the women and children who are more seriously affected, because they are weaker segments of the society. So I think it becomes absolutely essential on the part of each and every one of us to ensure that these issues of climate change, I'm sure all of you are very well aware of what has happened at COP26 in Glasgow recently. What are the challenges in front of the world? What are the challenges in front of India? India is the only country, and I'm sure all of you are aware, India is the only country which is meeting its commitments under the Paris Agreement of 2015, only G20 country. And in terms of the efforts that are being made for for renewable energy, I think that is also extremely commendable. And the last one in this, what is it that I could, the last one possibly I could share with you is terrorism. I think terrorism is one aspect that destroys peace. And rather than like some countries tend to use terrorism as an instrument of their foreign policy, of the state policy, rather than being used for that. And these countries find that if they use them, then terrorism comes to strike at them also and to destroy the peace in their own country. So there also societies and the world needs to come together and act as united, as a unified whole to fight the scourge of terrorism. There are a number of international organizations and international laws. India has put forward this comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism. We have put this in the United Nations, still under discussion, but in my view, it needs to be taken up very quickly and to ensure that there are very clear rules and guidelines as far as putting a stop to terror is concerned. So let me stop here. I had wanted to speak for 45 minutes, but it's become more than an hour. But I think we still have time for comments and for discussions. So I will throw the floor open, and whatever you have to say, it does not necessarily need to be a question. Let it be a comment. If you don't agree with something, or if you have some other aspects to add to what I have said, or some other issue, you're most welcome.
Thank you so much, sir, for this provocative and informative lecture. So with this, I would like to request every participant to raise their hand, and if they have any questions, they can raise their hand first, and then with that, we can have the questions first. So with this, I'll start with Amrita Tripathi. So you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yeah, thank you, sir, for giving me this opportunity. I hope I am audible.
Yes, you are.
Yeah,
actually, this email ID is a little bit wrong. My name is Rajan. And sir, basically, I have comment to make. Recently, I completed my PhD in philosophy. So my work was on meta philosophy. So such kind of question regarding how to proceed in debate, how to proceed in dialogue. So there are certain methods which we discuss, such as dialectical method or critical method and so on. So the moment you started your discussion on how to have a dialogue, so I found that there were so many commandments, like do this, don't do this, like we have to start with the agreement point rather than on the disagreement point. So this is somehow, I think, is problematic when we reach in the practical realm. And that problem is that we have to take into consideration the account of what is human nature, what are the earlier available options, like what is the role of history, what is the role of culture, what is the role of particular background in when we basically proceed for the discussion. So like we have to first of all distinguish between moral preaching and then moral reasoning. So like when we are discussing such kind of thinking, or like how to have a dialogue, so everyone knows, no one would be disagreeing with your option or commandments that do this, don't do this. Who will disagree about your option? But the the foundational problem arises when we talk about methods, when we talk about the foundation of such methods, or the fundamental, fundamentals of humanity, fundamentals of collective consciousness, like whether human nature is, is made to be in harmony or it is always in conflict, etc. kind of thing have to be taken into consideration. And when we, sir, my second comment is that when we start talking about how to have a dialogue, one of the problem which basically arises that we start by arising the identity politics related issues, gender issue, environmental issue, and ethnic issues and so on. So when we basically separate such kind of issue from a collective human consciousness to a separate issues, then problem basically arises. So do you think we really need to do such kind of identity politics related thinking or proposals so that we may proceed for dialogue? So these are some of my comments which basically I personally found challenging when I try to teach how to have dialogue, how to have debates in the issue. I think that no one is going to disagree with your commandments or to say the value which you propose, but the challenges are somehow fundamentals which I think is not haven't been seen so many time or haven't been undergone by the society or the thinkers and so on. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Rajan. There's nothing in what you have said that I could disagree with. I think I agree with everything that you say. Just a couple of comments. One is when you say that those are your commandments. So they are not commandments, they are suggestions. And when we are developing a theory, and since you are doing, you are a PhD, either student or you finished your PhD in philosophy, you know that in theory we talk of ideal situations, ideal circumstances. Even as far as economics is concerned, we create certain models on the basis of which there are certain forces acting at one particular point of time. But of course, life in reality is quite different. And I had mentioned that right at the beginning also, that, these is what is desirable. But to actually achieve those conditions is a challenge, is a problem. And we need to be mindful of that. So slowly and gradually, we need to inch towards that. And sometimes, it might be possible. Sometimes it might not be possible. Most of the times it is not possible, and you have to struggle with that. But still, again, being a student of philosophy, I'm sure you will agree that if something is not possible in real life at this moment, we should not stop aspiring for the ideal. I think we should at least see what the ideal is all about and try to make efforts to reach there, to get there. So that is what I meant also, that there is an ideal situation, and these are not commandments, these are suggestions, that this is how we, and if they are in front of you, and if every day you are able to go through it, don't have any misconceptions, don't have any stereotypes, act with humility, act with respect to the others, slowly and gradually, those ideas will be able to find a place in your mind. If you did not have even, I'll give you an example. There is a particular school in Lucknow. It's a large number of branches they have. It is called CMS, City Montessori School. There is one old gentleman, Mr. Jagdish Gandhi, and his wife, Bharati Gandhi. They run that school, and then they have a park there. And on the walls of that park, it is inscribed, all these noble thoughts from Mahatma Gandhi, from Swami Vivekananda, from other religions also, that you have to treat your fellow beings with respect, with kindness, with courtesy. What is the importance of love? What is the importance of compassion? And whenever I have gone there, and I have gone in the mornings, I go for walks and I go there, it has a very strong influence on your own thinking, even though you are sort of, just walking and you're just reading there, and there are images on the walls of all the walls are plastered with these sayings. The point I'm making is that if all these good, positive, happy, noble thoughts are dinned into your head day in and day out, it'll definitely have some positive impact on your thinking and on your behavior. So what you call commandments, I would call them sort of, that they are suggestions. And if we keep on, like it was said that if you keep on repeating a lie many times, many people will start believing it. If you start telling yourself good things, noble things, happy things over and over again, you will start, and after all, individuals have a willpower. It is not that they are, and it might need a lot of willpower, but you can marshal that willpower and you can sort of, work towards that. The question that you have is in terms of identity politics and whether, we can work without resorting to identity politics. I think that would be the ideal scenario where whatever you are doing for each and every one, because it is for the advantage and benefit of each and every one, irrespective of the individual's sex or caste or creed or color or language or region from where she comes or whatever. Irrespective of that, it should be. But then I think we have to face up to reality also, because after all, philosophy, you are talking in the realm of ideas, but for that, those aspects to be relevant, they have to be, you have to come to, the terra firma, the solid ground, and see what are the challenges, what is it that you need to, issues that you need to resolve. And in that context, you can't run away from identity politics. So you have to come to grips with it. So again, some issue aspirational, some issue that you need to get to, you want to get to. But from here, from A to B, at this level, you have to deal with all these identity politics and these issues. And that might be very, very different. What is in India, what is in China, what is in Russia, and what is in Europe. So I think all of us, wherever we are placed, we have to deal with those particular issues. Meaning, I have been, when I was ambassador to Sweden, for instance, now it's a huge country. Area is 500,000 square kilometers. Population is just about 9 million. So, about less than half of the population of Delhi, and a huge country. So they are very, very mindful of their personal space. And if you are going and someone even sort of, wishes them or something, they, unless they know the person, they will withdraw, they will recoil that who is this person who is accosting me here. While when you are going to in India, India is a country with 17% of the world population, 1.35 billion, with 2.4% of the world area. So, we are very heavily congested. So our ways of relating to people are very, very different. You meet people, you give them a hug. This is the normal way that you greet each other. But that is not something that is very normal or common in many other countries, although that is also, becoming popular in several countries. As Indians are going outside the country, there are about 25 to 30 million of them, Indian diaspora in different countries, and they have done exceedingly well. Wherever they have gone, they have done exceedingly well for themselves, in whether it is in the Middle East, where there might be in blue collar works, white collars, or in Europe, US, Australia, Canada, etc., where they might be in different professions. Wherever they have been, they have done extremely well for themselves. So Indian thought, Indian music, Indian culture, Indian cuisine, that is expanding. But let me finish here that there is one ideal that you have to aspire to, and there is one reality that you have to contend with. So both of these you need to be mindful of. Thank you.
Thank you so much for answering this question. So I now request a way to come up with this question.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank Thank you, sir, for the lecture. It was really a great time. Sir, my question was that as the country is in really going to a place where there is everywhere a peace has been going to be disturbed at the global rise of China, we can see that. So in our neighboring countries, South Asia, there are many neighboring countries with whom we had our special bondings in the bags, such as the Nepal. But in this long term, are we losing our that bonding, that cultural bonding which we used to have earlier? And also that is that this cultural diplomacy which we had is going to play a greater role in coming years. Also the rise of also the Indo-Pacific, which is a very crucial point in this particular time. So how we are going to deal with it, deal with our all neighboring countries taking together?
Okay, in these 4 sentences, I think you've asked me so many questions, which really would merit a full, 1-hour talk or lecture. But I'll try to sort of, respond to you briefly. Number one, as far as our neighboring countries are concerned, it is, if you look at SAARC, for instance, it is one single cultural milieu, because, the interaction of India with all these countries, you specifically referred to Nepal, but whether it is Nepal, it is Bhutan, even Myanmar. Myanmar is not a member of SAARC. Maldives, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Afghanistan, all of them, whether it is in terms of religion or culture or cuisine or music or dance, literature, we share so much in common with all of them. And it is as a result of the second, I will put it, colonization that, India and the 7-8 countries, independent countries, have come about, and they really need to live in peace and bonhomie and amity. But the problem is, and I'll recall the saying of Chanakya, his mandala theory, and his mandala theory was that your neighbor is always your adversary, and your neighbor's neighbor is a friend. And you look around in the world, and you will find that that is the situation. Normally, that is the situation. But all these countries have looked upon India. India is the largest in terms of size, geographical size, territorial size, population size, GDP, foreign trade, rate of growth, you name it. I think India accounts for about 70 to 80% of the total GDP or other fundamental indicators, economic and other social indicators of SAARC or South Asia. So, there has been this feeling of dominance, perceived dominance, that India could dominate. But still, India has had, culturally positive relations, but all these countries thought that they need to come together, and that is why we had SAARC was created in 1984. But that having been said, there is what China has been trying to do, since you referred to China, is that it is trying to create, number one, a string of pearls around India. Number two, as far as the neighbors are concerned, it has very deep pockets. It has about $3 to $4 trillion of foreign exchange reserves. So it has been giving funds, and particularly under its Belt and Road Initiative, so that these countries tend to favor, so to say, China when it comes to some of these crucial issues. The third aspect was that in the past, India did not really give so much of attention as far as these neighboring countries are concerned. Just to give you an example of from two of the countries. Number one, Nepal, since you mentioned, when this present government, and I would say that this present government has been giving much greater attention to the neighboring countries. The neighborhood first policy that was launched also when Prime Minister Modi was sworn in 2014. You had all the SAARC leaders who were invited, and all of them came, along with the Prime Minister of Mauritius, who came here. But as far as Nepal is concerned, and I refer to that since you made a mention of that, when Mr. Modi went there in August 2014, it was his the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister in 17 years. There had been no visit by an Indian Prime Minister for the last 17 years to Nepal. So, you know, when you have these very close relationships, and you know, even as far as your families are concerned, if you want to maintain, sustain, and nourish those relations, you have to keep in very close contact. And that is the importance of dialogue that we've been talking about, dialogue, communication, so that whatever are the problems, because India as a bigger country can definitely help and support these very many smaller countries. So it was after 17 years that happened. And also when we had the first Joint Economic Commission, when Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, she was the External Affairs Minister, and the JECs at the level of the External Affairs Minister. And when that took place, it took place after a gap of 23 years. Similarly, when Mr. Modi traveled to Colombo in March 2015, it was the first bilateral visit by an Indian Prime Minister in 32 years. So again, you know, I'm just giving you these figures to tell you that the Indian administration also in some way had neglected relations with these countries. But now a very strong effort is being made to reach out. And I think we have made some progress with Nepal. Let me, because there's no time to look at other countries, but I could, you know, share some thoughts about the others also. But specifically about Nepal, we had the instance of Mr. KP Sharma Oli, who was the former Prime Minister. And just so that he could stay in position, he could stay in power, that he, you know, went into all these hyper-nationalistic initiatives that he took in terms of changing the map of Nepal, claiming 3 areas of India, you know, this Kalapani and Lampaduria and one more area as belonging to Nepal. But then all these machinations have not helped him to stay in power. He was asked by the Supreme Court of Nepal to go, and we have Mr. Sher Bahadur Doiba, who has taken over as the Prime Ministership. So I think we can look forward to a much more stable and cordial state of relations between India and Nepal. Relations between India and Bangladesh, I think they are the best they have ever been since 1975. It is known as the golden phase of bilateral ties. Also with Sri Lanka, our relations are growing, improving. With Maldives, of course, there has been a 180 degrees change over the last 6-7 years, because we had Abdullah Yamin as the former president. Now it is Ibrahim Soli, and relations are excellent with Bhutan also. With Afghanistan, it is a question mark, because we have this Taliban government, which as, or dispensation, I will not call it a government still, because it is, no country has recognized it, although they have been in position for last more than 3.5 months. But no government in the world has still recognized it, not even China, not even Pakistan. On the question of cultural diplomacy, you know, cultural diplomacy and soft power is very important, is very significant. I acknowledge that, I accept that, I support that. But equally, if not more important, is that you should have hard power. You should have a stronger economy, so that you are able to give much more economic support to your neighbors. We have started doing that, whether it is Nepal, whether it is Bangladesh. So we are doing that, so we are maintaining our strong relations with them. As far as the Indo-Pacific is concerned and the Quad is concerned, I think these are issues which, you know, there was an artificial division between the Indian Ocean and the Asia Pacific. and the natural flow of trade, of people, of commerce, of cultures has been through the Indo-Pacific. So I think by supporting the idea of the Indo-Pacific, we are recognizing what is the reality on the ground. And it is only because China feels that it is a mechanism to stifle its own growth. And we have tried to tell it that it is not so. Indo-Pacific is an inclusive platform. It is not exclusive. So if China were also to subscribe to the UN Convention on Law of the Seas 1982, freedom of navigation in seas, freedom of navigation, freedom of overflights, rule of law, as far as the international waters are concerned, then of course China is also most welcome to become a part of this narrative, and also as far as the Quad is concerned. But so long as it is aggressive and belligerent and hegemonic in its aspirations, then of course there are problems. Let me stop here.
Thank you, sir.
I want to
Pooja, your voice is not clearly audible. Hello? It is breaking.
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah, I can't hear you. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to ask a question.
Sorry. Anyway, whoever has a question, maybe
she's giving me the word, if I understood correctly.
Okay, go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Hello, Ambassador, and thank you, Pooja, for the word. I'm joining you from Slovenia. I'm from Turkey. And when you were speaking, first of all, thank you for the great session. When you were speaking, you were talking about the humility. Humility must be there to have a perfect dialogue. And I totally agree with that. And I was just thinking about it when you were mentioning also about the willingness about the dialogue, like to have a perfect dialogue. Because like, as we all know, we are speaking in English, and I'm from Turkey, you're from there, and all the other countries, but we understand each other, we communicate, and we find the things and learn from each other. It's with the English, it's not even with our local language. And you probably had a lot of talks from all over the world as an ambassador with other nations, people, and you got a lot of probably common topics and to talk about. But all of those topics you were actually, and they were willing to understand you, and you were them. And that's actually what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to, what the point that I'm trying to come. It's not only actually about the language we are speaking, but also the willingness. Because when we actually want to understand each other, we find a way. Like when the Chinese and Indian guy, maybe they speak very bad accents, but they speak English and they find a trade and they do an agreement and they do the trade perfectly. Or, I mean, what I'm trying to say is we need to have that need to communicate. And that actually gives us the willingness to communicate. And also another example is the European Union. And this is actually one of the best things probably we created as a humanity in the world, like without border and the same currency and everything. But why actually we had this? Because we had a very big destruction, the Second and the First World War. And then the people actually needed that we need to communicate. And that willingness comes after that. I'm sorry that I'm sorry to say that, but we just don't understand why we need dialogue without having this distraction, without having this wars, without having this genocide or this kind of big things. Because, you know, this global change, global climate change, like let's say the actor Leonardo DiCaprio is being, you know, a big part of this community, but we generally don't have any figure for this dialogue thing. We all know that dialogue can solve more problems. Dialogue can make the world a peaceful place. But I think what I'm saying is, I think the world is not ready to, you know, to protect these values. not ready to understand this need and to have this willingness. I'm just very curious about how do you think about this? Thank you.
Yeah, you make a large number of very important points, Furkan, and thank you very much for sharing your thoughts from Slovenia. A couple of things on that. Number one is that we understand each other when we want to understand each other. And irrespective of whatever, in terms of agreements that might have been written, you also mentioned about the case of China and so on and so forth. And we have had this experience that India and China signed 5 agreements, 1993, 96, 2005, 2002, 12, 2013, basically all of them designed how do we maintain peace and tranquility on our borders. It worked for about 30 years. Then suddenly one day it didn't work, because it's not that the agreements did not exist, but that one side felt that it did not need to or did not want to follow those agreements. So, basically it is, what do you want to do? And that is why, when we just a few days ago, when the Indian External Affairs Minister was talking in Singapore at the Bloomberg event, and someone asked him, he said, I am very clear in what I tell the Chinese, but, and I'm sure they understand me very well. But if they pose as if they don't understand what I mean, then it's not my problem. So I think a dialogue is when we are talking about that on both sides, there has to be humility, there has to be that you need to be, both sides need to want to come to some sort of an agreement. If one side has, decided right from the beginning that we don't want to come to any sort of agreement, then irrespective of whatever the arguments might be, you will not be able to do that. The other points that you make is dialogue is very essential. You're right, absolutely. In such, when the whole world is in such circumstances of diversity and there are so many challenges. But what really happens, and I'm sure you would have observed this, and the other participants in the group would also have observed it, that we normally are talking at each other. We are normally talking to each other. We are never talking with each other. When you are speaking, I need to be fully 100% focused on what you are saying. But actually what happens is that when people are having a conversation, the other person who is listening, because to have a good dialogue, you have to be a good listener. And the world today is not a good listener. What the people who are talking with the other person, they are thinking, okay, how can I prove myself to be smarter than what you are? How can I raise questions? What am I going to say in my response? So rather than listening to you, assimilating what you are saying, trying to appreciate and understand what you are saying, their mind is basically working on what are they going to say? How are they going to respond? And that, in my view, is one of the biggest challenges. That everyone, when you come to a conference room, you are always thinking, okay, he's saying that, how will I rebut that? How will I counter that? And so that is not the way to have a proper dialogue, a positive dialogue, a real dialogue. And so I think that is the challenge. The third and the last aspect that I'll make here is that people feel the need for a dialogue when they are faced with a crisis. If there is no crisis, there's no possibility, there's no need of a dialogue. Would you agree with that? That, when there is war, then you come to the negotiating table. When the climate issue is so very, the impact is so very severe, then you come and have all these COP26, UNEP, and all the other issues. Otherwise, for the last so many hundreds of years, when you thought that the atmosphere is good enough to absorb all the carbon that we are guzzling out, then there is no need for talking about this. So the need of dialogue comes when you are confronted with a challenge. Before that, you are very happy in your own comfort zone, and everyone is very happy in their comfort zones. So you don't really need to sort of, focus in a very determined manner and apply yourself to solving a problem, trying to find out what the views and what the positions of the other person are. I thought I'll share these thoughts on these very important issues that you raised. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Am I audible now?
Yes, much better. Yes.
So, yeah. So I'd request other participants, if they have any questions, they can raise hand and ask away. Anyone? Yeah. So if not, if anyone does not have any question, I personally have a question which I would like to ask you. So like, it's not a question. Basically, it's more of a clarification. So I'm doing a PhD from Department of Philosophy, but my major is feminist film theory. So talking about feminist perspective, we as we are talking about dialogue and understanding each other from without any prejudices, any biasness. But in philosophy, we have a very particular concept of epistemic injustice, which a person, where a person takes the other person as not credible enough for a dialogue or to have an argument or to knowledge about anything at all. So in that situation, it basically majorly happens like the term idea of gaslighting, which we all are facing in contemporary time now, that gaslighting is somewhere where the other person does not take the, like, woman in particular, not credible enough for having an argument or to have knowledge at all. So in that situation, how do we actually overcome this gender biasness, this gender discrimination which we have in our society, to overcome with the people who gaslight women, or not just women, but also the marginalized people? So how do we come to an argument, come to a place where we can have a dialogue with these kind of perpetrators?
I think that's a very important question that you raise, and this is, something that we experience in our own lives. So, again, off the cuff remarks that I will make is, number one, when there are such societal issues, when there are such societal problems, like even in India, if you have the question of untouchability, you can make a law and you can make it illegal. You can make it that, anyone who practices by thought, word, action, deed, anything as far as untouchability is concerned, or as far as the, the Dalits or the oppressed classes are concerned, then the law will take its own action against them. How many years ago this was put into place, but still you find the curve is there. It is a declining curve. It's a declining trend. It's a decreasing trend. But, between law and change in mindset in society, it takes time. And one has to be prepared for that. And similar is the case as far as women are concerned, that, there are certain stereotypes. I mentioned about stereotypes when you're having a dialogue in that context. So there are stereotypes, there are preconceived notions, misconceptions, misperceptions that need to be sort of, thrown out. And I think as women come more into the mainstream of society, that will be helped to a very great extent. I have found in many countries, for instance, to give you an example of Sweden or Norway, where I was there are no reservations by their own merits. For instance, if the membership of the parliament was 300, the number of women in the parliament were more than 150. If the number of cabinet ministers was 23, 12 were women. Similarly, as far as governors are concerned. So I think by sheer dint of hard work, talent, and genius, women are able to come up and get their place. And I think it has to be, initially, you might need reservations for some places. I'm not against reservation. Even in a country like Norway, there is a reservation of 40% for women in offices, not for the highest echelons of responsibility, but in most of the other areas where they are working. And that has really helped them in Norway. And Norway also, you know, is one of the Nordic countries, very developed, one of the highest per capita incomes in the country, in the world. So they do extremely well. So one is in terms of, you know, whether it is reservation or other, I think all different issues will will necessitate different approaches. But since you mentioned the case of women, so it is definitely whether with reservation, but the hard work, the responsibility, the credibility of women in the workforce, that will have to come from the women themselves. Secondly, what I will say, and it would be a time-consuming process. You cannot expect that, you know, if there is any, even if there's a 33% reservation in the parliament and all, that the view and thinking of people is going to change immediately. No, it is going to take some time. Second is that not the whole society is built up of such people who have these thoughts or these ideas that, you know, women are not up to the mark, and women need to sort of, you know, should not get promotion beyond a particular point of you know, responsibility, etc., etc. There are definitely a large number of people amongst men and women both. And I think they need to be more vocal. They need to come out and speak out more openly, whether it is in the TV discussions, in writings, in the press, in print media, electronic media, now on the social media also. So I think there needs to be a certain meaning. If you're talking about women, it should not be only focused on sort of, you know, culture and fashion and other sort of things. I think some other aspects also. And this will definitely lend much greater weight and much greater strength to what we are trying to do, that is to get women the rightful place in the society and in the world. And, you know, this is a problem, this is a challenge, of course, maybe in different degrees. It's not only in India, it's all over the world. It's in Europe, it's in the US. You see what is happening in China with this world famous tennis star, Peng Shuai. And, you know, she makes one allegation of having been assaulted by the former vice premier, Zhang Gaoli, and suddenly she disappears from completely from all her Weibo chats, you know, which is like our Twitter or something. All those are erased. She is no longer to be heard. Nothing is known about her. So, meaning these are societies which are so very, I would say, male-dominated and protecting their turf, that they don't want any aspersions, any fingers to be raised against them. But both in its own country, well, in China, these possibilities might be limited. But I think the world over, there is this campaign to free her and to have an open, transparent, and impartial inquiry into all her allegations that she's made. So I think the world also needs to come together. These days, we have a large number of instruments at our disposal, and we should use all possible avenues to make sure that, you know, the march towards equality of the sexes comes as quickly as possible. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Yeah, it was really enlightening. Obviously, we have to be more patient towards our goal, and we cannot just lose patience over dialogue and everything. So thank you so much for this. So I'd request anyone, if they have any question, they can raise hand. So so there's another comment by Ravi Dubey in the chat box that, sir, any word on necklaces of diamond, as it is the strategy which should be taken into account more seriously?
Ravi, can you speak about what do you mean by necklace of diamond?
The way China has been started circling the whole of India, neighboring countries. So the Indian, it's an Indian initiative through which we can get more connected to our neighboring countries. So, sir, I thought that this could be a strategy in coming future, so that we can be more connected, more interlinked with our neighboring countries, and more to tackle about any kind of disputes or any kind of misunderstandings with our neighboring related with China. China will be always there as a part. So can it be said that we should be more focused on this strategy of being more connected with our neighboring countries?
Absolutely. I think you have a very valid point. And I think the government has been focusing on this a great deal. And you would see it's not only the physical connectivity, because physical connectivity, I think now for the first time, we have access to our northeastern states through Bangladesh, also through Chittagong to northeast. Earlier, you would recall that it was only the Siliguri corridor or the Chicken's Neck that we were able to access the northeastern states. But now we are able to go, there are many avenues of accessing the northeastern states from the mainland of India. Secondly, in terms of connectivity from northeast, we are also connecting them with the ASEAN, whether it is the trilateral highway, which goes from northeast of India to Myanmar to Thailand, and from there it should travel also to Cambodia and to Vietnam. So, you know, that connectivity should be completed there. As far as Nepal is concerned, you know, it is not only physical connectivity, but it is also in terms of oil pipelines and gas pipelines. And we've been able to do that quite well, pretty well over the last few years. In terms of connectivity, you would also recall that Prime Minister, right in the first year, when he came in 2014, he had announced the launch of a SAARC satellite, you know, that would connect all the countries, all the SAARC countries. Pakistan did not wish to be a part of it because, you know, it always looks upon itself as being, you know, something equal to be able to challenge India. So it didn't want to be a part of it. So now it has been rechristened as a South Asian satellite. And it was launched, I think, in 2016. And it is providing services to all countries. It is education, it is meteorology, it is weather, it is entertainment, it is telemedicine. So for all these benefits, all these facilities, all these SAARC countries are getting this advantage. Of course, I'm sure all of you are aware about the Chabahar project, Chabahar port, which is in Iran. And since Pakistan does not allow access for Indian cargo or passengers to Afghanistan or to Central Asia, we've been developing the Chabahar port, and we have gone up north. Now, even though the Taliban is there, they have said that they would like to not create any impediments or any obstacles in the development and the use of the Chabahar port. So we are working with Iran, we are working with Uzbekistan, and let us see if we can continue to work with whichever dispensation is there in Afghanistan, because that will be to the benefit and advantage of the people of Afghanistan and, of course, of the Central Asian countries. So in addition to physical connectivity, we have also, the Prime Minister has also spoken about digital connectivity. So with all these countries, we are focusing on this particular aspects, even as far as our CoWIN app is concerned. We have offered to share that with all these neighboring countries and with the other countries. So I think there is a much greater focus on connecting with these countries and on having very close and frequent contact with these communication with the leadership of these countries. As I mentioned to you, to Nepal, first visit after 17 years. And after that, over the last 6 years, the Prime Minister has traveled to that country 4 times. And similarly to Sri Lanka, it was in March 2015, after a gap of about 32 years. Then he went there on a couple of other occasions, but also after the Easter bombings that took place in April of last year, year before that. So I think efforts are being made to reach out so that we continue to maintain our very good relations, very vibrant and dynamic relations with the neighborhood. Meaning China will try to do what it does. So rather than our being critical of what it is doing, I think we also need to step up to the plate and become much more active in reaching out and expanding our cooperation with all these countries. And I think that is what is happening now also. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. So as we don't have any more questions, I would like to, on behalf of InDialogue Foundation, I would like to conclude this session. And thank you once again, sir, for this thought-provoking and enlightening lecture. And with this, I would like to take a thank from behalf of everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pooja. All the very best.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir.
God bless. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
I wish all of you
sir.
the very best. I was, I think a few of you who asked questions, you were able to tell me what you were doing, but I hope there will be other opportunities when we can meet, we can interact, and we can sort of, know a little more about each other. That will add even greater value to our interaction. And hopefully we can get friends like Furkan from Slovenia to India, so we can have an in-person interaction with all the others also.
Sir.
Thank you very much.
Sir.
And I wish you all the very best.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much.